recollect, so to speak.
Intelligent Ramblings with your host, Bill Lofton. Co-hosted by Gary Glenn and William Howington with help from John Cohn.
Good evening. Welcome to Intelligent Ramblings. I'm Bill Lofton. I'm your host with my co-host, Mr. Gary Glenn, Mr. William Howington. Last but not least, Mr. John Cohn. And I wanted to let everybody know that you are experiencing the beginning of the new intelligent background music. This is our intelligent theme, and we thought we would play it for you a little bit louder here so you can enjoy it. Got a little beat to it, eh? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's tone
I'll
that.
give it a 7, Dick.
Let's tune that down just a little bit. So we can still hear each other, but you can still hear the music. Created specifically for Intelligent Ramblings by Intelligent Ramblings. So we own the copyright, so piss off if you're trying to steal my music. All right, here we go. Topic number 1 for tonight on Intelligent Ramblings is Ukraine started the war? WTF? Really? What in the hell? The actual war began around 2014 or 2012, something like that, when the Russians started sending these groups into Ukraine and Crimea and just doing all kinds of nefarious acts. And this has been ongoing for years and years. The actual full-scale invasion of Ukraine was by Russia on February 24th, 2022. And later that day at about 6 a.m. Moscow time, Putin took to the airways to announce the beginning of a special military operation. Within minutes, explosions were heard on major cities all across Ukraine, and air raid sirens began to sound in Kiev. Swift and severe sanctions were slapped on Russia by the United States and all our allies. And that's where it began. It began when he amassed 190,000 troops in a semicircle around Ukraine. That's when it began. And the fact that President Trump is saying that Ukraine started it, I heard it on TV the other night, and I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. It just blew my damn mind. I didn't know what to say. But I had a cold shiver go up through my spine that we are starting to jump on Russia's bandwagon, the red bastards. You can't trust them as far as you can throw them. And it just really, really shook me up. It really gave me an uneasy feeling. Like, I guess it's time to go back and count your ammunition. Make sure all your rifles are clean. Get ready, because shit's fixing to happen. That's what scares me.
Yeah, I think, Bill, you're right about who started what. And I found Zelensky's comment afterwards that Trump lives in this disinformation space. And so that explains why he says stuff like that. I thought that was pretty accurate.
I'm going to give him a day or two to retract.
Well, I hope so, William. But
I mean, William, you're a Republican, just hardcore. We all know that shit. But what do you think?
Well, like I said, I'm gonna give him a day or two to retract that, or at least explain it a little better.
What if he doesn't retract?
Well, then I'll have to disagree with him. Unless he's talking about Ukraine voting to leave the Soviet Union in 1991 and separating from Russia and the Soviets. That's what he's talking about. I don't know. Like I said, I'll give him a day or two to clarify. But if he doesn't, if he actually says Ukraine started it, then I'll have to disagree with him on this one.
Let me tell you, I've worked for somebody that was like Donald Trump. He practices selective exposure, number one. He only looks at the stuff that he wants to look at. And number two, he practices selective belief. He believes what he wants to. I guarantee you Donald Trump could pass a polygraph with flying colors because he believes his own crap. And that's pretty scary. Whether he wants to couch it in terms of, like you say, voted to leave the Soviet Union, well, a whole bunch of people bailed out of the Soviet Union, the old USSR. And Putin was old school KGB, used to getting what he wanted, when he wanted, where he wanted, and nobody was going to say him nay, because that's the way they operated. And now you've got Trump, which he said, I'm going to end the war. It'll be a beautiful end, whatever. Everything to Trump is hyperbole. It's the greatest ever, it's the best ever, and all that kind of stuff. And when he says that Ukraine started the war, which is just crap, everybody knows that. The whole world looked at that and shook their head. Then he said,
he didn't say war.
Well, he said they started it. He said they could have ended it. They should never have started it. I believe that's the way it was put.
Yeah.
Oh, he said he said they started it. That's a quote unquote.
Yeah. Well,
they started it.
Well, then we know what it is, unless we're living under a rock somewhere. And he believes that probably. And he also called Zelensky a dictator. Well, Zelensky was a democratically elected leader, president of that. Then he said something about, he's just a television guy that's been elected president. Duh. Who does that sound like? So the Donald lives in his own world. And you're either in that world or you're not. And if you're not, you're on the outs. And all of these cronies and toadies that are sucking up to him, they're not going to tell him no. I mean, even when it's blatantly not true, they'll still believe it. And that's a problem.
Bill, the thing that goes alongside Trump's comments about Ukraine starting the war is the fact that they're starting peace talks, in quotes, that include Russia, the United States, and they're having it in Saudi Arabia. Ukraine is not invited, and I think that looks bad for Ukraine. There I said 2 times in one sentence. And it goes right along with the disinformation that Trump is repeating. It's basically Russian disinformation that he's putting forward. So 2 things not very good that are related and not good for Ukraine.
Well, they kind of walked that back a little bit today, John. They said this was just a starting point. Okay, I'm with you there. Okay, everybody's got to start somewhere. But to think that they're going to broker a peace deal that Ukraine has no part of is ludicrous. Who in his right mind would believe that? Oh yeah, y'all just work it out. We'll just take whatever you want to say.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And there's a bridge in Brooklyn I'll make you a deal on too while we're at it.
No, really.
We'll say a mountain
in Florida.
I'll say a mountain down in South Florida.
Well,
Ukraine
is not going to get back Crimea, and they're not going to get back.
Why not?
20%, because Russia has captured it.
Yeah, but why not?
But because Russia's not going to go for it.
It's their property. It's their property.
Yeah, but Russia
It was
has
a
captured it.
it was a Ukrainian property that the Russians stole. Why should they stop fighting? Okay, let's go back
Well,
to like
they're
we
not
were
gonna
talking
stop
about last
fighting.
week. What do you? Let's go back to what you talked about last week. Russia invades us and takes South Carolina, and then we run them off, but they stay in South Carolina. You want to play in Russian football instead of Clemson? What the hell? They should get Crimea back. And until they do, they should not stop fighting.
Well, they're not going to stop
Well-
fighting them because Russia's not going to give back the Crimea or the 20% of land they've already captured and are now occupying.
Well, that's
Well,
what
it's gonna-
That's what peace treaties are about.
That's right, and that there's going to have to be some give and take on both sides. You reach a point. You see, what's happened now is the United States seems to be leaning toward Russia, and that's discouraging everybody else. The other problem is Europe doesn't have its crap together in the least. Some of them are really backing Ukraine, and some of them are backing off. If every other state in Europe, every other country in Europe would get behind Ukraine, then you wouldn't really have a problem, even though whether they're in the NATO alliance or not. But they're reluctant.
I would say
to do
they're
that.
actually, Gary, I would say they're actually closer to being in line and in full support of Ukraine than you might think. If you think
Well,
about it,
John,
the
we'll see what
UK,
happens.
France, West Germany,
I
the
agree.
Baltic countries,
I agree,
um,
John.
Poland.
Well, we'll see what happens after this conference that they're all in.
Yeah.
That
See what,
Ukraine's
we'll see what
not in.
happens, what comes out of that?
That Ukraine's
They're
not in.
there, but the
What a
rest
snub.
of Europe is having
Really?
well, the rest of Europe's having a conference to find out what they're going to try to do to address the situation. Now, this is apart from these alleged start to the peace talks in Saudi
Mhm.
Arabia. This is
Alleged being the
another
big
conference. This is another conference that the leaders of Europe are getting into now, and they are
Well, that's good.
they are far from unanimous. But maybe they'll come out with some unanimity. That would be great. I think it would be great for Ukraine to feel that, and if the Russians see that, and maybe America will buy into it too, and we can get this thing solved and settled. You know, hundreds of thousands of people are dead and displaced. Hundreds of
Oh, yeah.
see. You know, Putin thought he was going to roll into Kiev in a week or so. And now it's 3 years later, coming up on 3 years. Would you say, John, the 24th of February? Okay.
Pretty
Well,
close.
Here we are.
5 days
Here we are on
away.
the 20th.
3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 years. So it's time for that to be over a long time ago.
Yeah, you're looking at refugees that are displaced, the 20% that's been captured, and the military all can't vote in an election. Of course, Zelensky has declared martial law, which means there was no election last year.
Right? It'd be hard to have
His
one.
5 years were up. He's president for 5 years, and then there's supposed to be an election, but you can't have an election when you got all these people that can't vote.
Damn, William, you're starting to sound like a Democrat.
No, I'm just saying.
I mean, that's what the
Zelensky-
Democrats are saying.
Zelensky's in power no matter what.
Well, he kind of has to be. There's no way to have a vote.
I know.
His country's under siege by a bunch of red communists. Whatever happened to the United States going better dead than red? That's what that means.
Well, I'm anxious to see what Trump comes up with. If he says Ukraine unilaterally just surrenders, then I won't like that. I
Are you
think,
still you're going to still think Trump is still the next thing to Jesus?
I never said that.
Well, most Republicans think that.
No,
This guy can't do any wrong.
Most Trumpians think that.
Trumpians. You realize what Trump's doing right now? He's
There's
got
a new
the-
term out there.
What's that,
You
Gary?
ever heard the term rhino, Republican in name only? That's a term, rhino, R-I-N-O, Republican in name only. The new term is Ritno, Republican in Trump's name only.
I haven't
That's-
heard that.
That's a
That's
new
scary. Well, you know, it scares me the fact that he's got his Proud Boys as his own personal Gestapo. He cannot be prosecuted for anything that he does. He's removing, or at least talking about removing a bunch of generals. Who's this starting to sound like? Does this sound like a democratic country president?
No. Hey, we have a
Well,
good
he's not the
comment
only
from
one.
Andrea.
It disturbs me about Hegseth talking about removing generals.
Well, I agree, Andrea. Nobody was working towards negotiations, including Biden. Biden didn't do diddly about it. All he did was keep throwing money at it. And yeah, the EU is responding, but they're responding wondering, what are we going to do if Trump goes on Russia's side?
And maybe that's Trump's gambit. Maybe that's the end game, is to get the EU involved by doing these. As we know, Trump deals in hyperbole. Everything's the greatest ever. It's the most beautiful ever. It's the largest crowd ever. So maybe by doing this exaggerated stuff, maybe he's trying to force their hand. We'll see. We'll see how it all works out. I'm kind of with William. We'll see how it plays. But if it doesn't play, then we need to do something else.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta wait and see what he does. If like I said, if he gives Russia the 20% plus the Crimea, I don't know if that's included in that 20% or not, but definitely the Crimea and 20%, then I'll disagree with him.
There's certain sections of Ukraine that are mostly Russian speaking. And that's where that's where the Russians have a lot of influence already. So it's a complicated situation, but it's one that should have been resolved.
Well, I hope you're right.
Ago.
I hope you're right in the fact that he's playing a game like he was with the tariffs, and by doing this, he is forcing the European Union to pony up and pay more for arms than what they're paying right now. Because I would say that of the 30% that other countries are contributing to the war in Ukraine on Ukraine's behalf, I would say out of that 30%, 10%, a minimum, is coming from the United States, where it ought to be 3% coming from the United States.
Well, I don't mind spending money on Ukraine's defense. I don't know if that's what Trump has in mind or not.
Maybe a guarantee of protection and NATO membership would be worth the land. I don't know if they.
Ukraine?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ukraine's not in NATO, but maybe I see her point. It's a concession. That's why you got diplomats. Supposedly that cooler heads will prevail and some reasonable compromise can be had. Now, I don't think you need to be rewarding Russia for that kind of aggression, but you reach a point. What are you going to do?
Russia's never going to let Ukraine get into NATO. They'll never do it because they're going to pick on them again.
Not as long as Trump is president. I don't think they'll get into NATO.
No. I mean, it won't happen because, I mean, Ukraine and Russia have been fighting each other on and off for 100 years. You know, Russia's been trying to take that for 100 years, and they've had many wars. And this is just the current war that's going on in Ukraine.
I think if we see Ukraine lean really heavily towards the EU, they might actually be better off in the near term than being that close of an ally with the United States. Because I think the EU would at least admit them to the EU and give them a path to getting into NATO, and where the U.S. is not going to support that. And if they try to get into NATO while Trump is president, I'd be willing to bet that the U.S. would vote against admitting them to NATO.
Well, let's don't blame Trump. I mean, they haven't been in NATO, and they haven't been
I'm just
supported
making a
in NATO
prediction
by any
based on what
president.
he said.
Well, yeah, I make that prediction too. They haven't been in NATO, and they're not going to be in NATO.
Well, I would say if they wanted to, and the rest of NATO wanted them to join with Trump as president, our country's vote would be to not allow them into NATO, because that's not what Russia wants.
Well, let me tell you something. This has probably got something to do with the fact of what Trump's playing with Ukraine. U.S. Congress had authorized some $400 million in military aid for Ukraine, but U.S. President held up the release of that security assistance. In a phone call only with Zelensky on July 25th, 2019, Trump implied that the aid would be released only if Zelensky would do us a favor by endorsing a pair of unsubstantiated claims about Trump's political opponents. Zelensky never provided the quid pro quo that Trump had requested. I'll say that again. Zelensky never provided the quid pro quo that Trump had requested, and the funds were finally made available in September of 2019. Trump's attempt to pressure a foreign government for personal gains led to the U.S. House of Representatives to launch impeachment proceedings against him in December 2019. You think Trump holds a grudge?
No. Trump.
He would never do
hold
that.
a
Would
grudge?
he?
does.
No.
He would never do that.
Perish the thought.
Well, maybe that's what part of this is about. It's like payback, mother.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Could be. Well,
Might be.
might be. Well, guys, let's go on to our second topic. What cuts, if any, are truly necessary to the federal bureaucracy waving a flag? And I got a short video that I found on social media that I thought would be pretty cool to explain this, and then we'll go into it in our discussion.
Represents $100 billion, which is roughly the money that it takes to go into to fund the Obamacare or the Affordable Health Care Plan. $100 billion for all those people that are on the plan. This right here represents 4.5 trillion. It's 45 of the 100 billions. 4.5 trillion, which is the amount of money that went to the top tier in the last round of tax breaks. You can look it up yourself. It is a deficit that will be created. The shortfall, the CBO just scored it one more time, and this doesn't even include the corporate tax cuts. This right here is $50 billion, which is the amount of money that has been saved so far by DOGE and the Trump administration. Everything from slashing departments, mass firings, removing certain privileges, defunding certain things, and all they could come up with was $50 billion bucks. And I got to tell you, this is what makes me crazy. It certainly does look like the richest people in the world are telling us we can't afford anything because of this.
Bro makes a good point.
I think he makes a very good point. Gary, what do you think about this?
Well, I think that the problem that you have, and I think we can all probably come to the agreement that there is waste in government. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's probably things that don't need to be there. But the problem when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you want to beat it to death. So instead of taking a scalpel and looking at what the true fact that things can be trimmed, what you've done is you've given some of the DOGE people a machete or a chainsaw. and they're wiping out whole things willy-nilly, and then all of a sudden they realize, like when they cut a bunch of the nuclear jobs, they realize that some of those people were in charge of keeping things safe from nuclear radiation, all that kind of stuff. No, we got to bring them back. We got to bring them back, you know. So I think this whole thing was rolled out in a terrible situation. You know, if Elon Musk is an advisor, and I don't have any problem with him being an advisor, but it seems to me he's got hiring and firing capabilities. That's not an advisor. That's some sort of department chief right there. I have no problem with them cutting some of the fat in the government waste. And we all, you know, you remember those days of the $850 toilet seats and all that kind of stuff. And the fact is that, you know, if you don't spend all your money, you're not going to get that much money. So you look away when it comes time to request it again. So you look for ways to spend that money. If it doesn't need to be spent, let's don't spend it. Let's put it somewhere else where it does need to be spent. And I'm seeing all these people that are hired and then they're laid off and then they're brought back. And some of them, you know, they've been there for many, many years. Things of the national park or the CDC or some things that seem to me to be pretty necessary for the living of life and the way that we're used to living this life and trying to be safe with our water and our food and everything else. Just to turn people loose and say, just cut. Okay, yeah, you can cut, but you know, I can cut a lot of stuff out of my budget too, but I still like to eat. There's certain things I've got to have. What have we got to have?
Well, it's like they've cut out 1,000
cutting waste.
You know, I absolutely believe that our government is bloated, but you need to go in there with a scalpel rather than going there with a damn hacksaw, like you're saying. And
yeah,
going off and firing 1,000 Forest Service rangers when they're already underpaid, overworked, and they don't have enough of them. I saw today where they just hacked up they're working on the VA now. And right here, VA, I use the VA, well, and I tell you what, they are undermanned pitifully. And they're going in there chopping up the VA? Really? This guy's taking care of veterans? Kiss my ass, Trump. Stay away from the VA. Stay away from the Forest Service.
You know, talk about the Forest Service. You've got people now that should be training for things like fire season and so forth, but they don't have enough personnel to train. So I think you put people in charge of some things when they have no idea how things work.
Oh, absolutely.
Again, there's waste out there. We can look for ways to trim that. We can look for ways that, but let's not cut off our nose to spite our face, as the old saying says. You're going to have that nose somewhere down the line.
Absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, agree that the federal bureaucracy is too big and there are constructive ways of doing this, but not the way we're doing it now for 2 or 3 reasons. One, the reasons that Gary and Bill have already spoken about. 2, the way they're doing it is just flat illegal, and it's doing more damage than it is good. There are some agencies where if we spent more money in the near term, we could save money over the long term. I'll give you the IRS as an example. They're running systems that were designed and built in the 60s and 70s. And if they took the time and money and resources that it takes to upgrade systems like that, which are multi-year, very expensive upgrades, they would be good to go for decades afterwards. And the people of the country, us taxpayers, would benefit from it. So that's a case where you could spend more money and actually make money in the long term. But they're not willing to think like that.
This doesn't
didn't Biden hire 100,000 IRS employees?
I believe he did, and they were hired mostly to go out and look for tax fraud, which is a job that pays for itself over and over again every year. That was the purpose of most of those IRS hires, if I recall correctly.
I was going to say, Trump isn't the only one to hire people. Biden hired a bunch.
Well, Trump's indiscriminately firing people.
I don't know if it's indiscriminately. He's cutting out what he thinks is fat.
It's indiscriminate when you fire somebody and
No.
then they get rehired the next day. That's indiscriminate.
Well,
That's walking in and going, you, and you are gone. See ya. And that's it. And oh, whoops. Next day you're going, oh, I shouldn't have fired him, and him because they're responsible for the safety of our country and our nukes are involved. And oh, we can't send some simpleton from Washington, D.C. down there that is Trump's fifth cousin to run the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. We have to send people that are rocket scientists down there to do that. And we just fired all the rocket scientists, and we're going to replace them with idiots, Republicans.
Well, it's not.
Hey,
just
I'm going
a-
to put
it's
up
not-
this
it's not-
comment that Andrea made because I think
Okay.
it's really good. She says, I agree that this has been a destructive way to carry out cuts, but again, to play devil's advocate, we talk about cutting spending and the deficit, and who is doing anything about it? Neither party, Andrea, is willing to do anything about it.
Absolutely agree.
The
The Democrats are just as bad.
and the Republicans are at the trough, and they are not going to back away. I don't think that,
What?
The only way we're
you know,
going to
that
stop
they're
this
willing to do it.
is through term limits. That's the only way this is going to happen is term limits. Nobody
I
wants
think
to do
term
anything but it.
limits would be a good way, a good kind of blunt instrument way to do it. I think there are other ways to do it as well.
Yeah, when
We-
you
we
got a
can
guy
almost-
that goes into office as a congressman or a senator, and his bank says he's got $50,000 in it, and he stays for 20 years, and that's all he does for 20 years is be a congressman or a senator, and in 20 years his bank account says 20 million. Something's wrong. Something's wrong.
Well, it could be that he wrote a book based on his experiences in the Congress, and he earned the money from book sales or something like that, or speaking engagements.
See a lot of books, John, because it's all of them. It's all of them. You track the people that came in there as a young congressman, and 20 years later they're still there. You track them, and I promise
Well-
you, 2 or 3 books are being sold, but the rest of them, where's that money coming from? There's your
they're
cuts.
coming from contacts that they've made in the business world and things like that they use for their own personal gain. There's supposed to be a law about using public office for private gain, but that has to be a proven, a direct correlation, a tit for tat kind of thing. It's not the fact that, we've become buddies and I benefit from your business expertise, which doesn't necessarily put me in that category. But, we can address this on just about every major issue that we've had. I mean, both parties, when they don't want to fool with it, they kick the can down the road. I mean, you look at what Obama deported more people than the Bushes did. Obama was known as the deporter in chief. But nobody says much about that because it was a democratic idea.
Kenny, I absolutely agree with you, and the fact that the government should be held to some standards for substantiation of why are they firing these people? Just taking their living away for nothing. They should have reasons. There's plenty of flunkies out there to fire, but they're just going after, they're random. They're not going in and going after specific you know,
I don't know that it's that random. I think their criteria is, well, let's start with the probationary employees. Those are the employees that have been there for 6 months or a year. And so they just, whoever fits that profile, that's who gets fired. It's just an easy way to make a list and get rid of people. Same outcome. It's not fair. It's not legal, and there are multiple lawsuits already that have been brought by federal employees that have been fired in this way.
okay, what
And
about
hopefully they'll be successful.
that makes sense, John, but what about the forest ranger, this young lady that had been working for the Forest Service for 23 years, and her record stated that she had been an exemplary employee. All her remarks were nothing but great. She'd been doing this 23 years, and just blam, to the point where the next day she wanted to go into her records and pull all her personal files out, and she was locked out of the computer.
Yeah. I don't claim to know all the reasons or all the ways they create their lists of people to get to fire, but I have read for multiple agencies, it's the probationary employees, the new employees are among the first to go.
Well,
Hey,
it happens
Salvador.
in our
In,
industry,
first
too.
out.
Salvador, thank you for being here. We appreciate it more.
Thank you. It happens to people in private industry too. Depends on what side of the stuff you come down on.
How you feel,
You know,
guys feel how they're
I-
treating
I-
the immigrants in Guantanamo? I think that it's mistreatment. They're once again indiscriminately going after people. ICE is evil, and they're going after people, and they're not asking them the right questions. They're not going after the criminals. They're going after people that don't have papers, and I don't know how to solve that. I have no clue.
Well, that's not who's at Guantanamo Bay. That's terrorists. That's foreign
No.
nationals.
They're
That's
taking
not-
No,
they're taking people from Hall County and sending them to Guantanamo Bay if they don't have papers, and then they sort them out down there. That's not how they look at it. They go in and grab. If there's 20 people in this home, they take all 20 and they sort them out after they send them to Guantanamo.
That's the first I've heard of that.
it's
Hey,
a real thing.
That's absolute truth.
Well, a lot of this stuff is, that's why, John, you're talking about all these lawsuits. That's why they're there. Some of this stuff is blatantly forbade by the Constitution.
Hmm.
All this business about birthright citizenship. Well, if you want to overturn birthright citizenship, you've got to amend the Constitution. You
Right.
can do that. You can do that, but not right now. That's unconstitutional. And it
I
doesn't
don't think
matter
he's
what
going after birthright.
anybody says about that. Trump's going after birthright people. If you're born in the United States, I don't care who your parents are, you're a United States citizen. That's what it says in the Constitution.
How's it going to affect the economy? Well, we're going to be paying more money for the things that the immigrants are producing. You think eggs are bad
Yep.
now? You think chicken's high now? You think beef's high now? Give it about 6 months, because you'll see high. We'll all be, one thing, I want to encourage two things right now. One, if you're Latino, make sure you got your papers on you at all times, bar, whatever. It's like driver's license and your papers that say that you're an American citizen. Make sure you got those on you at all times. 'Cause
Or
some
you're
asshole,
here illegally.
of course,
Yeah.
some asshole from ICE is going to snatch your ass up and take you to Guantanamo. I mean, it's just where it is right now. It's dangerous for the Latino community, and I feel for you guys. The next thing I want to say is spring's coming up. Plant a garden. I was talking to a friend on this afternoon, and you do not know when food is going to become a luxury. So if you've got a 6x6 spot anywhere in your yard, in front of your apartment, next to your mobile home, whatever, you need a 6x6 spot and you can put up some tomato plants and some beans and whatnot. I encourage everybody to do that. It doesn't take a lot of effort and you can grow some food, because it's going to get weird. The cartoon in Washington, D.C. is getting very colorful, and it's going fast, if you hadn't noticed. This has only been a couple of weeks since Captain Crazy has taken over the helm, and get ready for it. Immigration judges are being fired, so I guess we won't want anyone coming in legally either. There was a place in California, that in San Diego, I believe, that when immigrants would come in, they would go there, and they had thousands of people coming in, thousands. They have not had one since Trump took office. It's working as far as stopping the immigration. It's working for Trump, but at what cost? You know.
Well, now, it seemed like on a show about 2 months ago, you were kind of in favor of immigration reform.
I am, absolutely. But I think that they need to somehow vet these people. And, I mean, we need these people coming in our country. We need that. But we don't need it coming in 10,000 a day and indiscriminately just going across the line and fanning out into the states. What they need to do is come in a single line, and they're vetted, and they prove who they are, prove what they want, and we put them in the right places so they're not walking around hungry all day. They got a spot to go to. But, you know, right now, I mean, it's either this much or this much, you know, and we got to get this much. We need the people to come in because they're part of our economy, and we welcome that. And it's
Quick
always been that way.
reminder, back in November, in the Senate, there was an immigration policy bill that covered things like who we were going to let in, how to deal with legal and illegal immigrants, and also gave the president the ability to close the border when he wanted to. And Trump got his cronies in the Senate to stop the bill because he wanted to campaign on immigration reform. And doesn't seem to be a priority. You know, we're not getting a new immigration policy out of what's going on right now. We're just ruining people's lives. And it's just, we voted for this, so this is what we're getting.
I wonder how many people that voted for this lost their jobs.
Which people, Gary? Are you?
Just a thought. The people who voted to put the current administration in office have been caught up in some of this fallout. I'm curious. I just wondered. I don't know. I don't have any hard facts. That thought just crossed my mind. Well,
if you think about it, there are thousands of federal employees that have been fired in the last couple of weeks. And so if their politics break down the same way the general public's does, then 30 to 40% of those people voted for Trump. And now they've been fired.
You get what you vote for.
Yeah.
In some respects.
We've met the enemy and he is us.
That was a great Pogo cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
We could do.
Say let it all
this
wash
is a
out.
real. Sorry, go ahead, William.
I'm gonna say let it all wash out first. Let's see what happens. I don't know about all. You know, you're talking about 1,000 people fired in federal jobs. That's a drop in the bucket. There are millions of federal employees.
There was 1,000 Rangers fired.
There have been many
that
thousands of federal employees fired over the last couple of weeks.
300 FFA people. What did I say? FAA, right?
Yeah, FAA.
Federal Aviation
And they were all probationary.
Right, that's what we were saying earlier. The probationary employees are the new employees. They're easy to identify in the agency, and just let them go.
Well, we certainly haven't had any aviation disasters in recent days, have we? I mean, maybe we just don't need those FAA people anymore, huh?
Those people on the Delta plane in Toronto are very fortunate. And
There's
hats
Tim
off
Lee.
Have
to
anything to
the,
do with FAA. That had to do with
hats
the
off
wind
to the
gust.
crew that got all those 80 people out safely. Man, that was amazing.
Absolutely. That's a
That-
miracle.
That was miraculous. Did you see the way that thing came down? The fact that anybody
That was a hard
walked away
landing.
from that.
Yeah.
The fact that anybody walked away from that is amazing. And the fact that only 2 are hospitalized now and they're expected to be all right is an absolute miracle.
Yeah.
Any way, shape, form you want to cut it. Somebody
I
on
wanna-
that plane was doing something right.
I want to welcome Tim Lee back to the show. Negotiate any kind of terms for peace. Much of the money we sent is missing. That's possible. I'm 100% in favor of peace. If you look on my Facebook, I've got the colors of Ukraine and I think I said freedom for Ukraine. And it's been there since September 24th, 2021, when Russia invaded, and I'll never take it down until that happens.
Really quick, to the point about much of the money we sent is missing, I would have to disagree with that because
Well,
about half of the money we spent in this country. We didn't send cash to Ukraine. 50% of what was allocated for the Ukraine went to defense contractors in this country to build up our stockpiles. And we supplied Ukraine out of those stockpiles. So we employed people, we used manufacturing facilities here in the US, and so 50% of that money never left this country. It was spent right here.
That's good. That's the way to do it.
well, in
Yeah,
Tim's,
and a lot of the rest of it went to supply the troops.
in Tim's
food
defense, he
and
sent me a text, and he didn't mean to send that. So,
Okay, thank you, Tim.
220,000 federal jobs lost since Trump. That's a lot. If he's
You
got
can
rid of
answer that
220,
last part, though.
Yeah, you got to make sure you vet that too.
Yeah,
You can't believe everything
that's a
you
little
read on
high.
the internet. Abraham Lincoln said that on the internet.
Yeah,
Right.
I remember that.
What's our next topic, Bill?
our next topic is, well, let's see, got one more comment before we switch off from Andrea Poe. Andrea, you are our #1 fan, and we appreciate you more than you know. Farmers in the Heartland will not be happy for much longer about voting for Trump. People in the national parks in Colorado, Idaho, South Dakota will not be happy. There's going to be a lot of people that are not happy they voted for Trump. In the long run, I am pretty sure.
Why aren't the farmers happy? Aren't they going to get higher prices? We've said that everything's going up.
Not if they go
If
out of
they get
business
higher
before they get the prices.
Why are they going out of business?
They don't have anybody
They're-
to bring the crops in.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize we had that many illegal immigrants in those in the heartland.
Yeah,
Well, many of the people that work for the farmers are actually here legally. They have work visas, and those are arranged by their employers, and they are housed and sent to the fields every day by their employers, and they're here seasonally, and they go home at the end of the harvest. So
Well, that's doing it right there.
It's
That's the way
working.
Bill wants to do it.
It has been working in its own way, but it's not going to be like that anymore.
We're not going to give visas anymore.
We're going to deport people willy-nilly.
With
If
visas.
they get caught, they're gone. And so they're not going to come to this country and risk getting caught. If the risk is you get caught by ICE and sent into detention, and you're weighing that against however much money those guys make in a day, or a harvest, I think many of them are going to choose not to come here. So it just goes back to what Andrea said about the farmers not being happy for much longer. And yeah, the people in the national parks in Colorado, Idaho, South Dakota, Montana, Utah, they're going to be visitors wanting to go to those parks, and they'll be understaffed. Now, I remind you that they closed the national parks during COVID, and that was terrible because I love me a national park and I'll go to one in a heartbeat. And I hate it that they had to close then. I hate it that they're going to have to close now. They're not going to be able to staff
I think
and
if they're
operate the
closed,
parks.
I think if they're closed and they're understaffed, I believe they'll be staffed pretty quick. I don't think Trump's going to allow these parks to go understaffed. I don't know how many's being fired and who's being fired. I just
William.
don't think Trump's going to allow it.
William, they were understaffed before he started firing them.
Before-
They were understaffed. The
that's
Veterans
what I'm
Administration, which is woefully understaffed, has had over 1,000 people fired. Veterans Administration. It's already way underdone. Anyway, back on to our next topic. How dangerous is this? The president declares he is in control of all federal agencies, including independent agencies, as in FDA, FAA, with executive order ensuring accountability for all agencies. John, give me a talk on this, buddy.
I'm so glad you brought this up, Bill. So yesterday, later in the day yesterday, Trump put out this executive order called Ensuring Accountability for All Agencies. And the effect of the order is to give the president complete control of all the administrative agencies that are in the executive branch. So this is wrong on a couple of different levels. Several of those agencies, like the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, that inspects our food, and the FAA, which keeps our airways safe. For example, those are two independent agencies. The Federal Reserve, another example, near and dear to my heart.
Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yes, exactly. Are intended to be independent from the executive. They don't answer to the executive branch. They answer to Congress. And Trump, in his executive order, said, well, I'm just going to change all that. They're going to answer to me from now on. And I think that is really, really dangerous, because the immediate effect is to turn those agencies that were independent into politically aligned agencies. So if you want your food to be inspected by people that are beholden to this president or any president, or if you want your airways to be controlled by politically aligned people, then have at it. But frankly, this is a wrong, stupid, and illegal, and hopefully somebody's going to jump him with a lawsuit pretty quick over it, because it is illegal. By the way, you can go to the White House website, whitehouse.gov, and go to presidential actions, and you can see all of the executive orders that have been issued by President Trump. It's just there they all are. If you want to know what they are, you can read them.
It's like Andrea, he's following the script for Project 2025.
I agree.
That he didn't read. He's following the script.
He's not coming up with these executive orders. He has done no homework. He just signs whatever they hand him.
Yep.
And if you want to find out what's coming next week or next month, just read the applicable section from Project 2025, because they are implementing that faithfully.
Well, I don't know about the FDA, but the FAA monitors themselves. They don't have a watchdog.
They do.
All the hiring.
They have. There's an oversight committee in Congress for each of these agencies, and it was set up that way originally when they were formed. And the oversight committee basically holds their feet to the fire, makes them toe the line, and straightens them out when they're not doing the right thing. And the fact that they're independent from the executive branch is a good thing. A lot of the agencies are able to enact administrative law to promote whatever their agency is responsible for doing, for making happen in our country. There are administrative courts and judges that settle differences around those laws, and that's how the business of America gets done out in the real world. If it wasn't for these independent agencies, a lot of things wouldn't happen, like food wouldn't be inspected consistently and safely, and airlines wouldn't be regulated fairly and consistently and safely. Just a couple of examples.
Well, the consolidation of too much power in the hands of a single individual or a single group of individuals has always been a pretty scary prospect to me. I mean, does all of this include Trump putting himself in charge of the Kennedy Center honors too?
Not this order in particular. He just kind of randomly declared that during the week last week. Something hit him about the Kennedy Center, and he said, well, I'm just going to run that little show.
Well, he didn't come to any of the presentations, I don't think, while he was president. So this way we're going to see a whole lot more wrestling and country music people.
No, we're not seeing that.
He just has a political axe to grind, I believe, with the board and some of the people that are on stage at the Kennedy Center. And so he's just going to take his ball and bat and go home.
Yep, and a lot of those people are gone too.
Yeah.
Already.
Well, I read where airline pilots talk about when they fly from the United States to Canada, it's like going in time warp. Canada is so much better that the difference, the United States hasn't, they need to come into the 21st century. Maybe Trump will get them to do that. All their machines and stuff are from the 70s. And Canada has upgraded theirs, and they're using 30% people and doing 50% more work. At least that's what I read. Whether that's true or not, you'll have to look it up. But I'm all for that. Let's straighten the FAA out. We need safe skies. And
Are
We need
you
that pretty
saying our
quick.
skies are unsafe?
you know what I'm saying, we do need safe skies.
But you're saying they're not safe right now then?
No, I didn't say that. I said we need safe skies.
Well, yeah, we do. And we've been having them, you know, albeit with
Well,
older
We've had 'em.
equipment and not enough controllers, but we have safe airspace.
Yeah.
it's
Amazing how many
still-
people land and take off in this country every day. Thousands
Yeah,
and thousands and thousands.
statistically,
and
it's still
thousands.
one of the safest ways to travel. But you know, if you're one of those statistics, it's and of course we've had a lot of aviation disasters in the news recently, and that always, you know, the squeaky wheel always gets the grease. So I think.
Well,
too,
it's
that
more,
is associated-
It's
Hey,
more
keep in mind,
spectacular.
This is
Yeah,
$1 billion worth of stuff. I mean, you know, some of these planes are really old, but they just keep, you know, fixing them and updating them and stuff like that because to these new planes, I mean, you don't just go down to your, excuse me, you don't just go down to your corner lot and pick you up a new jumbo jet. I mean, those things cost
No.
a whole bunch of money. So some of this is almost inevitable unless we start replacing the fleet of stuff.
Well, it's not the planes necessarily, it's the maintenance. I mean, that
I
all
agree
goes
with
hand
that.
in hand, I guess, but
But you know, stuff wears out after a while. It's got to either
Well,
be
that's
updated
part
or
of
replaced.
FAA's responsibility is to make sure that the airlines are inspecting their aircraft, making repairs, doing maintenance on schedule. They all know when it's supposed to happen and what is supposed to happen. It's not a secret. It's not
Well,
hard
these-
to figure out.
these
well,
The
crashes didn't
FAA
have anything to
does
do.
that. They enforce that.
They
That
didn't have
crash
anything
up
to
in-
do with maintenance.
The
Well,
FAA
that crash
does.
up in Canada looked like it was an equipment failure to me.
No, it was
It looked
the
like
wind
looks
blew
like
it.
the landing. Well, it looks like the
Landing
landing gear
gear.
collapsed.
Landing gear dropped. Did not go down. Didn't engage. It may have gone down, but it didn't lock. And when it
That's
when
what
it
that's
hit,
what it looked like to me.
it
That's
bounced.
what
It
happened.
hit real hard,
Yeah.
and when it hit, it
Yeah.
just knocked it down. And that's
Well, that's
when
what
it's
mechanical
coming in
thing.
like that, you know, and then off it goes. Gentlemen, we have reached our witching hour. Another episode of Intelligent Ramblings. We appreciate everybody being here. We appreciate everybody
Yeah.
that watches us after the show when we're not live. Live, it gets more spectacular, but we appreciate you watching this show on down the road. And we will be back with you again next Wednesday at 8 p.m. here on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And you have comments that you want us to discuss or topics, you can email us at intelligentramblings@gmail.com, or you can go to our Facebook friends and post whatever the hell you want to post, except political memes, which I've outlawed since the last election. But post anything else that you want to talk about and give us some ideas. We'll talk about whatever you want to talk about, almost. Any last 3 words from anybody? 3 words. What anybody got to say? Gotta go.
Be safe.
Be safe.
It's
Yeah.
a dangerous world out there.
All
Be
right.
kind.
That is my number
Thank you,
one
Gary.
rule in my life. And it's hard for me to accomplish it sometimes, but I still believe in be nice. If you can do that, then maybe the guy next to you will be nice too. See you next week.
Good night.
Bye.
Everybody.